weight of military spending is shifting away from the Euro-Atlantic region. Countries in West Asia and Asia are now moving much faster. Many blame China's geostrategic ambitions for this change. China is making its neighbors nervous. It is militarizing the South China Sea. It has installed anti-ship cruise missiles and surface-to-air missile systems on 3 of its fortified outposts in this region. One of these installations lies on the west of the Philippines. It's being seen as Beijing's show of strength in the disputed waters. It's the first development of its kind, we can tell you. Reports suggest that the missile platforms were moved to the Spratly Islands in the last 30 days. China remains unfazed in the face of criticism. It claims indisputable sovereignty over this area. It claims this area as its own. So what has led to the dispute? The Spratly Islands comprise hundreds of islands and reefs. They're small, they're largely uninhabited. They fall on several trade routes. They're home to fishing grounds. In short, they're strategically located. Governments in the region are vying for control, and China has been at the forefront of this effort. Just last month, the Chinese military held its largest ever maritime drill in this region. It unveiled aircraft carrier strike groups and the most advanced weaponry of the People's Liberation Army, or the PLA. China claims almost all of South China Sea. This claim has been challenged not by one, not by two, but 5 countries in the region: Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei and Taiwan. It's not just the neighbors who have rejected China's assertion of rights. During his trip to Australia, French President Emmanuel Macron has said that 2 nations, alongside fellow democracy India, had the responsibility to protect this region from Chinese hegemony. Macron also said that no country can be allowed to dominate the Indo-Pacific region. France has a number of island territories in the Pacific Ocean. It is a stakeholder here, which is why the president is rallying for support against China. Australia and New Zealand have also voiced concerns about what they call strategic anxiety. That's diplomatic code for Beijing's influence in the region. China is also using aids and loans to infiltrate the economies of the countries in the Pacific. A research report says that between the year 2006 and 2016, China gave $1.8 billion to 218 projects to countries like Fiji, Papua New Guinea and Vanuatu. So while India resets its relationship, it must not lose sight of the potential pitfalls. And that brings us to another problem vis-à-vis China. Their smartphones. They've flooded markets worldwide, including here in India. Now, the US is banning devices by Huawei and ZTE over security concerns. But these products continue to glut the Indian market. Here's a report.
They are cheap. They come with the latest features. And they are giving the best in the business a run for their money. Chinese smartphone companies are ruling the market at the moment. Out of the top 5 smartphone companies today, 3 of them are of Chinese origin. Companies like Xiaomi, Oppo and Vivo have managed to catch the imagination of the common man. Due to their affordable prices, these phones sell like hotcakes the world over, and India is no exception. Chinese smartphone companies rule the Indian markets as well. According to Xinhua, smartphone makers from China sell more devices together than any other company. Xiaomi sells the most number of smartphones in India. It has 27% of the market share. It is closely followed by Samsung, which has 25% of the market. Vivo, Oppo and Lenovo are 3 other Chinese companies that complete the top 5 list. But many are concerned about the proliferation of Chinese devices in India and around the world. There is a feeling that these phones may be leaking data back to China. In 2017, the Indian government sent out notices to these Chinese companies, amongst others, putting their security protocol to the test. The United States Department of Defense shares similar concerns. The Pentagon has now banned retail outlets on American military bases to stop selling phones made by Huawei and ZTE. The Department of Defense feels that devices made by these companies could pose a security risk, but members of the US military can still buy these phones from outside. One report within the American media claims that the Pentagon is now considering if it needs to issue an advisory against the two companies. But the trouble for these two companies is far from over. Back in 2014, Huawei was banned from bidding for US government contracts. Earlier this year, 6 major US intelligence chiefs had warned American citizens from buying phones from ZTE and Huawei. In January, US lawmakers had introduced a bill to ban Huawei and ZTE devices from US government agencies. If the Trump administration decided to clamp down on the use of these devices, the decision could have a ripple effect on other Chinese companies around the world, including India, which is one of the largest markets for these companies. Bureau Report, WION.
Now for our special report tonight, journalists across the globe have risked their lives to tell you the stories that matter, stories that tug at your heartstrings, stories that expose the ugly face of mankind, of governments. Journalists working in violence-hit countries have often risked their lives to do their job. The latest incident of reporters paying with their lives was in Afghanistan just this week. Their only crime? They were doing their job. On World Press Freedom Day today, Gravitas pays a tribute to the 10 journalists who died in Afghanistan 4 days ago.
On April 30th, an attacker riding a motorcycle detonated explosives in the Afghan capital. Half an hour later, as journalists rushed to the scene of the attack, another explosion ripped through Kabul. A suicide bomber, allegedly posing as a journalist, blew himself up as a group of journalists waited by a security cordon. 9 journalists were killed in what was termed as the deadliest day in Afghan media history.
What happened is precisely the type of scenario we look at during the training sessions we organize in Afghanistan. A first attack takes place and it's meant, amongst other things, to attract journalists, and then a second attack happens, targeting them. Of course, the journalists who turn up to do their job and cover the first attack are the victims of a second attack. This is the worst attack since the beginning of the war in Afghanistan in 2001.
One of the most prominent journalists who were killed that day was Shah Marai. A veteran photographer with the news agency AFP, Marai rose through the ranks. He started as a fixer in 1996 with the agency and went on to become their chief photographer. He chronicled the fall of Taliban in 2011, his most notable work. Shah Marai is survived by 6 children, including a newborn daughter.
And he was always ready to go anywhere, even if it was dangerous. He would assess the risks, of course. But he had a passion for news. He wanted to be the first every time. He had tons of informations because he was also centralizing all the information for the photographer network at AFP. So yeah, he had a lot of. He was a huge asset for the office.
54-year-old Yar Mohammad Toki was due to marry his fiancée in less than a month. A camera person with Afghanistan's first 24/7 news channel Tolo News, Toki leaves behind his ailing mother and an unmarried sister, extremely vulnerable. He was the sole breadwinner of his family and spent most of his salary on medication and doctor's bills. 3 journalists from the Radio Free Europe Radio Liberty died in the April 30th attack. One who had barely even begun her career. 28-year-old Muharram Durrani was to begin working in mid-May and was on her way to the media organization's office for training. Sabawun Kakar was a 30-year-old journalist and a member of the agency's video team for the last 5 years. His colleague Abdullah Hananzai was just 26 years of age and had previously focused on the country's anti-narcotics program. 4 more journalists died in the line of duty on that fateful day. Ghazi Rasooli, a 1TV reporter, Navroz Razabs, a cameraman with 1TV, and 2 journalists who worked for Mashal TV, Salim Talash and Ali Salimi. Just hours after the suicide attack, a BBC journalist was shot dead in the coast region of East Afghanistan. 29-year-old Ahmad Shah will be remembered as a versatile and energetic reporter. Back in 2016, 7 Tolo TV employees were killed by a Taliban suicide attacker who rammed a car bomb into a bus driving them home from the station. But Monday's attack is surely the deadliest day for journalists in Afghanistan since the US-led campaign ousted the Taliban in 2001. Bureau Report, WION.
A sobering reminder of what this profession entails, what it stands for. But like most discussions, the talk around press freedom has also become vitiated. Social media is flooded with rhetorical statements on how the press must be fearless, independent, strong. We agree. It is the most vital sign of a thriving democracy, but unlike others, we also ask uncomfortable questions. Is free press a myth, we ask? Does such a thing truly exist? Has the media ever been truly unbiased? We'll take all those questions one by one. For the moment, we're beginning with the latest reports and what they say about the state of the press. UNESCO and the International Federation of Journalists have released a new report on press freedom in South Asia, and the findings are worrying. The International Federation of Journalists has documented 68 cases of journalists being detained or jailed in South Asia. Pakistan leads that pack. Between May 2017 and April 2018, 4 journalists were jailed in India, 21 in Pakistan, 19 in Nepal. Maldives jailed 11 journalists. Bangladesh put 10 behind bars. The numbers are pathetic. In today's digital age, internet plays a significant role in helping journalists do their jobs effectively. So internet shutdown is a big hurdle for those trying to relay information in real time. And India tops that list. The UNESCO report lists instances of internet shutdown in South Asia, which stands at 97, India leading that list with 82 such cases. Afghanistan remains the most dangerous place for journalists in South Asia. Between May 2017 and April this year, 22 journalists died in the line of duty in Afghanistan. 5 were killed in Pakistan in the same period. And now to the question of a free, unbiased press. Did it ever exist, we are asking. Can the media really isolate itself from society, its biases and its emotions? And who decides who is biased? Take the example of the freedom struggle and the role of the press during that period. Was the media unbiased in India? No, it spoke against the colonists, the British. It backed the freedom struggle. It followed a cause. The press does not operate in isolation is the point we're making. Media is a business now. There are always strings attached, more so now than ever before. And despite all these problems, all these issues, the media must uphold its fundamental principles, those of unbiased reporting. Then can a global news organization get away by writing an asymmetrical report? Our next report will tell you what we're talking about.
In September 2017, journalist Gauri Lankesh was shot dead in her home in Bengaluru. Within 24 hours, journalists from across the country rallied to demand justice for Lankesh. So far, so good. Along the way, the crime got a new spin. A case of murder became a case of persecution of journalists. The narrative gradually changed to journalists being gagged and intimidated in India. How they apparently paid for their lives for exposing the truth. Media agency Reuters, one of the world's oldest and most trusted, seems to have been swayed by this rhetoric. A recent report on the state of Indian media claims that journalists are increasingly facing threats for publishing news critical of the government. The agency spoke to a certain section of journalists known for their anti-government position. They claimed they were being threatened with physical harm, abused on social media, and ostracization by the Modi administration. The report said the situation was worsening as the next general election approaches. In publishing this report, Reuters has flouted the basic tenet of reporting, that is, getting all sides of a story. By only highlighting the version or opinion of left-leaning journalists without substantiating it with facts and without underscoring the opposite point of view. The report is a textbook example of what's wrong with the press. The journalists named and quoted by the agency claimed that they were harassed and threatened by pro-government activists, even faced with death threats on the social media. While they are entitled to their view, they tell just one side of the Indian press story. A contrarian view was neither sought nor quoted. All the report did was end with some comments from the ruling party and one quote of a supposedly pro-government journalist rubbishing the idea of freedom being curtailed. Media watchers in India and elsewhere have slammed this biased report. It is nobody's contention that all is well with the media, but to paint the picture with a broad stroke and push lopsided agenda-driven stories isn't acceptable. Perhaps the so-called custodians of free press will use this day for introspection before sitting in judgment over others. Bureau Report, WION.
That's the big question the world seems to be toying with, whether US President Donald Trump should be awarded a Nobel Peace Prize. Not that the world can decide. Donald Trump has been nominated for the Peace Prize for his efforts, alleged efforts, to ease nuclear tensions with North Korea. Not just the Republicans, but a grateful South Korea has also seconded the proposal to this effect, although Trump will not be the first US president to receive this award. If he does indeed receive it, we'd say he'd be the most undeserving.
US President Donald Trump addressing a crowd of supporters in Michigan last week, and the fans start to chant in unison.
That's very nice, thank you. That's very nice. Nobel. I just want to get the job done.
Interestingly, President Trump was describing recent developments on the Korean Peninsula. A man who clearly knows how to gain attention. The US President was put forward for the award by an 18-strong group of House Republicans. It comes after South Korean President Moon Jae-in said Donald Trump would be a worthy winner of the prize for his attempt to end Kim Jong-un's nuclear program. Moon Jae-in and North Korea leader Kim Jong-un last week pledged to end hostilities between their countries and work towards the complete denuclearization of the peninsula. So, President Trump is not the first US presidential nominee for the coveted award. It was in the year 2009 when Nobel Peace Prize was conferred to President Barack Obama. This was in recognition for his extraordinary efforts to strengthen international diplomacy and cooperation between peoples. There are other US presidential recipients as well: Theodore Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, and Jimmy Carter. Theodore Roosevelt was the first American to win a Nobel in any category. However, there are clouds hovering over one of the oldest and most prestigious cultural awards, the Nobel Prize for Literature. There are reports that it could be cancelled this year, with the organization responsible admitting it faces a crisis. The Swedish Academy is under fire for how it dealt with alleged sexual misconduct by French photographer Jean-Claude Arnault, who is married to a former member of the centuries-old institution. Well, the world would soon know the fate of the award for literature, but as far as President Trump's chances are concerned, he seems to be quite ready for the outcome.
Now they were saying, what do you think President Trump had to do with it? I'll tell you what. Like, how about everything?
Bureau Report, WION.
It is surprising to note that the strongest symbol of non-violence and peace in the 20th century, Mahatma Gandhi, the pioneer of the Indian freedom struggle, never received a Nobel Prize. He was nominated several times. He was never awarded. The Peace Prize Committee, which rarely concedes a mistake, eventually acknowledged that not awarding Mahatma Gandhi was an omission in 1989. 41 years after Gandhi's death, the Nobel Committee chairman paid a tribute to him as he presented that year's award to the Dalai Lama.